Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 785 with a review of September 5. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we're back. We had our, end-of-year episode for our favorite films of 2024. And now we're back. This is our first review of 2025, talking about September 5. Stephen, how's it feel to be back in the new year?
It feels okay. It's a strange year. We're recording this on the day of Trump's inauguration, so I have no idea how feeling okay is going to age roughly 24 hours from now. But movie-wise, I'm feeling good. It's always kind of fun to hit the reset button and go in fresh with the new year. How about you?
Yeah, doing all right. It is, the non-review episodes, we record them like slightly differently. It's not really that much differently, but like for these episodes, we've got to get a trailer connected. There's other audio inputs that are set up, and like our top 10 review, it's like everything is done in post, and it's kind of just like run with it. So I'm trying to get back into the flow. I forgot the last word I was saying, but there definitely wasn't a gap in time mid-sentence. But yeah, it feels good to be back, Steven.
Yep.
At least it did.
Sorry about that. For those listening, in case this wound up sounding weird, I thought my audio was messed up, and I didn't want Chris to keep going if we were going to have to re-record everything. But audio is fine.
We're doing good. You're coming through. The backup audio, at least, is coming through totally fine. So
yep.
even if your local copy's a little messed up, people they'll get to hear remote you for 10 seconds and then go back to the normal thing. But anyways, as I was saying, it feels great to be back in the swing of things, trying to get used to recording normally again. And yeah, excited to talk about September 5. This was one of those, I think I've talked about it on the podcast before. It was like a baffling preview where like it shows September 5 at the end of the preview in the same place it normally shows the release date
right.
for a movie. And I'm like, but when does it come out? It was in very, very limited release, I believe, in December. Now it is going wide, so we finally got a chance to see it, and we're going to talk about it. Anything you want to say before we jump in, Stephen?
Just that this movie screened in Venice and was expected to screen at TIFF. It's kind of bewildering that it didn't wind up getting accepted to that festival. But I say that because TIFF started September 5th. So there was an alternate world where we would have had extra confusion because it would have premiered on the actual date.
That would have been, pretty nice, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
But anyways, ready to get started, Stephen?
I'm ready.
All right, let's play these fine listeners the trailer for September 5 and then come back and give everybody a review.
Ready, camera one. Hit it.
Good morning. I'm Jim McKay speaking to you live from the Olympics in Munich, West Germany.
Talk me through the day.
Starts with volleyball, then there's boxing.
Good. It's America versus Cuba.
Sure you want to bring in the politics?
It's not about politics. It's about emotions.
And we're clear.
Great job, everyone.
Do you hear that?
Were those gunshots?
What's the situation?
The police are reporting that armed terrorists have attacked the Israeli athletes.
There's a hostage situation going on right now in the Olympic Village.
ABC wants news to take over.
Your sports, you're in way over your head.
400 yards away from where this is happening.
We are the only people capable of following it live. This is our story, and we're keeping it.
What do I tell the cameras?
What do you mean?
Can we show someone being shot on live television?
We're on.
The piece of what have been called the Serene Olympics was shattered this morning. The games are still going on. Within a few hundred yards, 9 terrified living human beings are being held prisoner.
You need to understand how sensitive this situation is.
These are just local cops doing things they have never done before.
We'll make it broadcast history. More people have seen this than watch Armstrong land on the moon.
Now, police are on the roof.
Oh, guys.
That's a TV. Or are they seeing what we're seeing?
What are you talking about?
Are the terrorists seeing this?
Are Our job is to tell the story of these individuals whose lives are at stake.
It's not okay. We made it worse.
It's a madhouse down here.
They know the whole world is watching. If they shoot someone on live television, whose story is that? Is it ours or is it theirs?
All right, so that was the trailer for September 5. It is the story of a group of Israeli athletes at the 1972 Olympics who are taken hostage, as told from the vantage point of the ABC Sports News group who is covering the event. Stephen Miller, what did you think of September 5?
September 5, I thought, was a very, very well-made movie that basically perfectly fulfills the promise of its trailer. It isn't quite real-time, of course, because it takes place over the course of a full day, but it feels nearly real-time. I'm just behind the scenes. What would it be like to be reporting the news, being a sports broadcaster in particular, who is suddenly reporting on a real-world event and kind of grappling with some of the ethics of depiction as a important thing that you are doing for the broader public versus depiction as being a tool of terrorist propaganda and potentially falling into exactly the wrong hands. I thought this was tense. I thought this was extremely well acted. John Magaro continues to be just a very, very strong actor. I feel like ever since I noticed him in First Cow, I feel like I've been impressed every time I see him on screen. I thought the movie grapples really interestingly with some of the political valences that would have been going on in Germany in the early 70s. There's Leni Benesch. Hopefully I'm pronouncing her name right. She was the actress who starred in The Teacher's Lounge, who is also here as Marianne, a translator. She really accurately reflects kind of the way people must have been feeling about Germany at this time, where there was a desire to move past their image from World War II, but still feeling this kind of tension with other Westerners who might have been with them. And overall, I thought the movie was a really interesting way to depict this time capsule moment. It is speaking about an event that, as the premise indicates, was broadcast on live television, which means many people must be deeply aware of the details of the Munich massacre that took place. I had never seen the Spielberg movie Munich, and also was fairly light on the details other than knowing roughly how it ended, which meant the play-by-play for me was still very riveting to watch, even though I kind of imagine if someone knew the historical details, maybe a lot of the tension of this movie would evaporate because you would already know exactly how it happened. It relies very heavily on archival footage, which again worked great for me as a kind of blend of documentary and fiction, but I can imagine if you were very familiar with the real event that it maybe would have played differently. All that to say, I think this was an extremely solid movie. I'm very glad I watched it. I feel that it doesn't quite rise to the level of being fantastic because it is really just taking the story, playing it straight, and other than the moments we see in the trailer of people grappling with the real world impact of what they're doing, we don't really get a lot more than that. Most of this is more the thrill you would get from watching, like, I don't know, even broadcast news or the morning show or things about very different subjects that are just about like the high wire act of being in a control room handling a live broadcast. I found that completely captivating in the moment, but it didn't leave me with quite as much to chew on as I was hoping for from the trailer. So really solid, well executed film. This would be like the greatest episode of The Newsroom, I think. It doesn't quite rise to the level that the premise was making me hope it would rise, of like really struggling with difficult concepts about what do you depict, what is your obligation as a journalist, when do you tip over to that line into voyeurism as opposed to doing your duty, all of those things that I was thinking about while I watched the movie. I just don't feel like it gave me any more ammunition than I already had going in. So minor criticism, but otherwise I think a super solid film. How about you?
Yeah. It's funny because like you kind of came around by like your initial statement was basically it perfectly executes on what the trailer gave you. And I was going to push back a little bit on that statement, but then you arrived at there by the end of, what you were saying, which is that it doesn't really go as far as you do kind of want. Because to me, the trailer very much sold the journalistic integrity. How do we balance the nature of us needing to cover the story in real time in a world in which this is a televised thing where the terrorists themselves can also be watching the broadcast that we're doing. And I wanted more of that from this film. And I think it kind of fails a bit on that standpoint. It's like the parts of the trailer where they're discussing that are the only parts of the film where they're discussing that. And besides that, there are like 2 other moments about journalistic integrity, but they're not about should they be covering it. It's about how do you say a thing that you haven't double confirmed yet? There are things where it's like, it's just lightly grazing the surface of that sort of topic. But like to your point also, like, the dealing with the political nature of just the games at this time being placed in Germany and what the individual characters and people feel about it, on both the being from Germany and feeling of it like, oh no, this is happening like on our watch right now. What does that say? And then also all the other people being in a different place where they don't speak the language and like all carrying in their biases to it. I thought it did do a good job of kind of at least touching into that area. The thing that I love the most about this film though is, this is the Saturday night to hostage situations. It is a film that is really about what does it take to cover an event in real time, even while you're there. And I think that the way this film shows the care, the amount of energy that goes into it, how all the people in a control room will just like scramble to make sure they can make the broadcast even happen, and dealing with like their windows of coverage with the bird and everything like that. Like there's a lot of stuff in this that kept me stimulated, like intellectually, just kind of like watching what it takes to do a live broadcast. And then also the suspense of having like a hostage situation. I think for me, the biggest downside of this film in general is just that due to the nature of how events play out, we don't have all of the information that we would like to have.
Right.
So this is not a story that is trying to get to the nuts and bolts of why events went down. It is communicating people in real time what they knew at the time. It's purposely trying to not look back with any information that people could have figured out in the days following, and just looking at what people had in real time, what they could speculate on, how they would try to understand what's going on. This was the first televised game or live televised games of the Olympics in history, which made this, it literally put things on the world stage. And this was one group who could be capturing in a real time that wasn't part of the German government, who wasn't bound by whatever they were deciding they wanted to show. So like that sort of playing off of what is the local news station saying versus what do these people want to say. I found that really, really fun, and kind of, I felt edge of my seat watching the film, just seeing what was going to take place. So all in all, I actually genuinely do enjoy this film. I just felt like the events themselves, there was a lot of nothing that this film was bringing to the table, but the way the event was covered is what all the excitement and like kind of justifies the premise of what this film wanted to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. And when I said it delivered on the trailer, I guess I should say it doesn't expound on the trailer very much. So like if the tone of the trailer is something you like, then I think the movie will be for you. If you're hoping that it is burying the lead or like hinting at a deep thing that it's going to unravel throughout the film, then yeah, it doesn't quite go that route. I almost respect there's a lot of moral ambiguity in this movie, which I believe people also said about Spielberg's Munich, where it isn't as if it isn't taking a side, right? Like terrorism, not good, clearly. But it's playing with the idea of what is the right thing to do in this moment, right? We get people voicing their pros and cons of showing things in real time and whether they're helping or harming, and you don't really get resolution there. You also get a lot of fear about acting as a propaganda arm of Black September, but at the same time, the film kind of indicates that they accidentally acted as a propaganda arm of Germany. So there's this kind of interesting thing where it refuses to have a clear moral or a clear lesson, which I think is fairly satisfying, even if it doesn't dig quite as deep as I would have wanted it to go. For totally unrelated reasons to the actual horrors of that day, there's a lot of stuff that I love in this, just about the nuts and bolts of old school film broadcasting.
Yeah.
You mentioned negotiating when they could get the bird. They love to show you the caption artist here, the person who actually has to make tactile captions and photograph them on a black background so they can literally superimpose the two images together.
Yeah. That's the thing, is like, for anybody who has ever seen like a caption on live news, like a fuck up where like it says something totally wrong or like misspells something, imagine if you had to put each letter onto a sign and then frame it perfectly and then overlay it like that.
Right, and you have almost no time to do it, right?
Yeah.
Especially when they're saying the name of an Israeli athlete over a microphone, and like hopefully they get some back and forth, but like the chance that you mess it up is so severe, and it's just the time crunch of all of this like is very much felt, almost in a way where I'm inclined to feel funny about it. You know, it's sort of a movie that is taking a very real horror, like a real tragedy that happened, and saying, think about how difficult and cool it is that media people were there. You know, it's a little bit of like Hollywood being in love with itself. But I felt it. Like I felt how impressive it is that they can pull that kind of thing off. You know, who finds B-reel? How do they get that when the only handheld camera they have is 16 millimeter, which means there's a time delay in when they can process it, as opposed to the live feed that they can have access to, but with a limited window. It all is very riveting to watch in real time, and imagining how stressful it would be to be the head of the control room at any given moment.
Or real fast, there's a moment where they want to do slow-mo, and there's literally a person turning a reel of film
yes
to do the slow motion. Can you run that back?
Yeah, it's basically like playing the turntable. It's unbelievably satisfying to watch that stuff happen and just get this glimpse. And you know, it gives you the same retro joy that Late Night with the Devil gave me last year, of just like kind of an ode to the way people used to have to work so hard to make television or film or really anything work. So the tactile nature of it, I really enjoyed. I thought all of the cast did a very good job. I don't have a great historical reference for who they're playing, right? Peter Jennings is extremely famous, and I'm sure I've seen clips of him before. But Benjamin Walker, who you might recognize as Gil-galad from the Rings of Power.
I mean, that guy, I can't not see him as an elf. Like his face, just his face shape and everything. I'm just like, you're not a real human.
I couldn't pull it in the moment. I was like, you are something superhuman. I want to say Clark Kent in some way. But yeah, Gil-galad fit too. But anyway, he's great. And again, he adds an interesting wrinkle into the proceeding where he's almost the voice of modern day, more sober political thought, where he's weighing the pros and cons of using the word terrorist and trying to indicate why this is very complicated and what the hostage takers might want in the end. And I think there's just all of these undercurrents of people who are bringing their own perspective, and the movie throws enough wrinkles in it to make it never be a very simple narrative. So I enjoyed that. Peter Sarsgaard is doing Peter Sarsgaard here, but always love to see him pop up, every year or two in a new festival movie. It was a very exciting movie to watch in the moment. I was definitely on the edge of my seat. It's just hard to express how kind of empty I felt at the end. The moment the movie ended, I was like, well, I just want to go on Wikipedia and read more about the actual events, because this didn't tell me a whole lot new. And even in the thrill of watching people capture live television, I feel like if I really broke it down, probably a quarter of this movie is archival footage of what ABC shot. It's hard to know exactly what they are bringing to the table, other than this kind of commentary that makes you feel visceral excitement over the archival footage that you're watching.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the thing is, it's like this is a film about how the archival footage was made, not actually about the event and what it meant and who was behind it and like what were the actual motivations for things. You know, like it's just a film that is, this is how we got it, and that has merit to it. I actually genuinely loved that aspect of the film, but yeah, as you said, like walking out of the theater, it was kind of like, huh. Why am I still hungry?
Right. Agreed.
This is a short and sweet statement. Anything else you want to talk about?
I guess we don't need to go into the explicit detail of how they handle the ending of this movie, but there's basically there's a high point followed by a very sobering low point, and the filmmakers make the choice of not really digging into that second piece. It almost feels like they decided formally that they only want the movie to take place when archival footage is available, and the moment archival footage is not available, they're kind of out within 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I get that in terms of having a consistent look and feel and making the story only be what was it like to broadcast this as an ABC control room head, producer, anchor, president, all of these different roles. But
former golf coverage guy getting to move his way up to the big leagues.
Yeah. But in terms of the story you wanted when you watched the trailer, of the moral weight of what is our responsibility, what have we put out in the world, even the stuff that the movie does really dig into a bit about journalistic integrity and fact-checking and stuff like that, it feels like there's a very interesting movie that could have been made that spends another maybe 20 minutes on the aftermath of what happened and kind of digs in a little bit more with, there are characters who we see them being excited about the thrill of having a big story. And one thing that hangs over the film a lot is this question of, is it okay that they are excited about this? Like, shouldn't they just see the sobering reality of what is happening and be horrified? Or is that passion that they have for having this big story good because it drives them to do the kind of reporting that you need done? And Peter Sarsgaard has a moment, John Magaro has a moment. They all have times where they kind of are celebratory of the fact that they are doing this, and that comes crashing down in a very heavy way, and then we just kind of leave without really piecing together, am I being crushed because they shouldn't have been excited? Are we being crushed because we are just honoring the victims of the true tragedy that happened? There's just something about it where it feels like it pulls the rug out from under you, but then doesn't really have any interest in interrogating that, and I would have liked to spend more time with that.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting because like one of the complaints I usually have about like films that are based on actual events is you're always writing to bullet points, right? Like these are the major milestones in this person's life, or these are the facts of the event. But if you are quite literally trying to rely on an archival footage and reverse engineering a film around that archival footage, it paints you into that box even further than just purely adapting a book or something like that. Right. So it does. I think that is the emptiness that I feel, is that we're only allowed to see what their cameras saw and then what was happening in the studio while those shots were being done. And then everything else is just kind of like, go watch another movie or as you said, go on Wikipedia and try to read about the actual event. So that definitely felt like a bummer to me, but the rest of it is so fun. And by fun, I mean, you know, like it's impressive what they're doing for the rest of it. None of it was fun.
I think it's okay. The movie is having fun at the same time. Like, we are supposed to enjoy watching the caption artist, you know, piece things together, or the slow-mo film editor who is literally, you know, like doing slow-mo in real time.
Film out of a can.
Yeah, we are definitely supposed to be having a good time or getting some delight, and that's also what's a little uneasy, because the movie is very self-satisfied at how cool it is that they're doing this.
Yeah.
And I understand this tragedy was 50 years ago, so maybe there's enough time has passed where it feels less strange that they're looking at other angles of the story. But yeah, I don't know. Very, very, very solid movie. Like, very competently made, very entertaining in the moment. It's just, there's just like a little bit missing, and I can't totally wrap my head around it.
Yeah. It is kind of funny to think about. Like, there's a moment in this film where they are debating whether or not to pass on a feed to a competing network.
Right.
And minor spoilers, I guess, they do, but they superimpose their logo on it. I was, during the course of the film, thinking, like, how ABC propaganda the movie is as well.
Right.
Because it's constantly like, here at ABC, we do this, and, like, we're so great, and, like, here's all the stuff we were doing. And I was like, huh, like, in any other movie, this would be like, advertisement. But, like, because it literally was a story that took place at ABC Studios, or at the remote studio for ABC, it's just kind of an interesting little thing.
Well, it's another one of those moral things the movie is interested in lobbing up, but not really spending much time on, which is, if your goal is to tell the truth, like to get this story because the public deserves to know it, attribution in sharing your feed with someone else should not really be your primary concern. But they managed to make us be rooting not only for John Magaro and the people who are actually in the control room, but for ABC as an entity to get credit for breaking the story. And that is a kind of, it's surprising that it works, but it does somehow work. Yeah.
But that's the thing too, is, let's say I was alive in 1972 and I was trying to pay attention to the news. A is, when the feed went dark, how would I know to switch over to CBS? Mm-hmm. B, if I was a CBS person and I was just watching CBS and then all of a sudden this came on and I was like, oh shit, and it said ABC in the corner, would I internalize that and then later switch to ABC for the next news hour, like, to try to figure out what had happened? Like, I just, there's something, there's a disconnect. It's so petty to do it.
I don't know if you're going to sell more meatballs or whatever they're doing in the commercial break because they know that ABC was the one who broke the story. It does feel very much like just for the historical record, they want everyone to know that it was them.
Yeah. And like, congratulations, guys. It took 50 years, but we know it was you now.
Exactly.
Should we get to verdicts now, Stephen?
Sure.
All right. Stephen Miller, if you were going to give us a must-see, recommend with the caveat, wait for rental, pass with the caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I'm giving it a recommend with a caveat. This got the classic 3.5 stars and a heart for me on Letterboxd, which means, like, I think it's limited, but man, it's really good at what it does within those limitations. I wanted more, but the experience of watching this was totally satisfying. It's only after leaving the theater that I started to feel like hollowness, and my gut reaction of that was amazing started to chip away until it just left me not 100% happy with the results. But extremely well-made movie. Watch the trailer, and if the trailer gets your heart racing, know that the movie will do the same very well.
Yeah, recommend with the caveat from me as well. It was kind of a joke, but it's pretty apt. This is the Saturday night of hostage covering films. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. The tension is there to give you what you need. It's just the information or the true discussing of what it means to be covering an event was a little bit lacking in the film. But none of that takes away from your enjoyment in real time as you're watching it. So still recommend it. It's just not like a standout breakaway first part of the year for me.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of our coverage of the 1972 Olympics. Stephen Miller, if people want to find you at the week, where can they do that?
Hey, it takes a long time to process 16mm film. If people want to find me, they can go to Threads or Blue Sky at sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or ChristopherIRL and a number of social platforms. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so in Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. Yeah. 2025, Stevens. New year, new us.
Mm-hmm. We're off to a great start.
Excited to see what we have in store for the rest of the year. But yeah, that's it for now. Talk to everybody later. Take care.
Bye.